Hello, and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. This is my podcast about finding our success in the gifts of who we truly are. These are conversations with people who know what that looks like and feels like, and this is all in the hopes that it inspires you to find ways to use your unique gifts in pursuing your passions, making your dreams come true, and engaging with the world in the way that you were created to truly serve. Now, I'd always say I like things to get deep because that's where we find the best stuff. But let's not get it twisted. This is also about the fun of life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's dare to be brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is a leader in naturally curly hair care. She is the creator, co-founder, and CEO of the CurlMix product line. Along with her husband and business partner, she has made it to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, Crain Chicago Business 20 in their 20s list, and also landed on Oprah's Favorite Things, which boosted them to the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing privately owned companies in America. She's an entrepreneur who always bets on herself. She's also a proud wife and a caring mom. It is my honor and pleasure to bring to the Fearless Authenticity podcast the one and only Kim Lewis. Hey, girl.
Jeanne, that was the best intro anyone's ever read from my bio ever.
So great. Listen, girl, I came up with comedians who are like, if you can't give somebody like a Showtime at the Apollo welcome, wait, what was the BET the comic jam they used to do? If you can't do it like that, you're not doing it.
Comedy Def Jam.
Comedy Def Jam, baby. Listen, that's how I'm trying to do it. And I was so impressed with you when I met you. Of course, I had to bring you on with some love, ma'am.
Thank you.
You know, I want to talk to you first about your natural hair care journey, because this is something we started. We first met a few weeks ago at Windy City Weekend, and we started talking about how our hair kind of reflects our lives and informs our lives. And especially when you talk about a natural hair care journey, especially when you talk about going from wearing your hair one way, whether it's chemicals or heat, to saying, you know what, I'm going to give all that up. And listen, it's for anybody who's listening and watching, there's no judgment on how you try to wear your crown. Okay. None of this is a judgment. This is just talking about this process, because anybody who's been through it goes through the emotions of it. And there was something you said when we talked on the air on Channel 7 that was so profound to me. You were talking about how CurlMix, you created CurlMix to help people with the external part of their hair, but that the key to it is really loving your hair, and that's an inside job. So Can you talk about how your journey with your natural hair, clearly you're in the business, but how did that process inform your life, your business, your success, how you see the world?
I want to tell you a quick little story to let you know where I started. So I think early on, I was taught to not like my natural hair. I was taught that straight hair was more beautiful, and I was getting my relaxer every 6 to 8 weeks, like all of my friends in high school. And it was, my grandmother gave me my first relaxer when I was 6 years old. And it was a summer my mom had left me with her, and she was just like, don't relax her hair. You know, but my grandmother's like Latina, like she's like half Latina and like half Native American. She don't know how to do black hair, you know? And so she's like, I got my grandbaby for summer. I'm doing her hair. I'm gonna put this little texturizer in it so it can be a little easier for me to manage. I don't think she really knew what she was really doing or even telling me, you know what I mean? She just thought, I want to take care of her. I want to, you know, take care of the best way I know how. And mom came back that summer and was like, what did you do? You know, and I had like long natural hair as a 6-year-old. So after you do that, you keep getting it done, because essentially now your hair is growing out and you've got 2 different textures that you're managing after you put the chemical straightener in. And I had that for the next, I don't know, throughout high school and some of college. And I remember my friends and me not sticking up for them, but kind of snickering. But I remember my friends talking about the girls who had these long natural hair in high school, and they were laughing at them, saying like, oh, they need a perm. Like, why don't they have a relaxer? Like, you know, like teasing them or whatever. And I remember laughing right along with them, because I thought natural hair was not beautiful as a teenager. I was so wrong. And I wish someone had taught me about self-love then, but I had not yet had that education or had been enlightened in that way. It wasn't until college, my mom went natural because she started having like alopecia in her, she just started balding in the front. And alopecia is like when you have hair loss and like a perfect circle.
Jada Pinkett has alopecia, and that's what sparked off all that stuff when she was losing her hair and she started wearing it bald.
And so, and what's crazy is like I started getting alopecia in college, and I was like 20 years old, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, maybe I should stop getting these relaxers. I was like, my mom went natural a year ago. Her hair looks good. If her hair looks good, then surely mine will look good. And so I followed my mom did it, and she like was going gray, and she like stopped coloring it, and she just started letting her good natural gray hair grow out. It looked beautiful, and I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And then my husband actually did my big chop for me back in college. We were dating back then.
Girl, stop. Tim been on Team Curly since day one.
Yes, Tim has been Team Kim. He has been team.
Yes.
What you want to do, babe? So we were sophomores, and we were in my dorm room, and I was like, all right, I had some like arts and crafts scissors, and I was like, I want you to take the first chop. And he was like, I don't feel comfortable with that, Kim. You got to take the first cut. If you cut the first cut, then I can do the rest. But I can't do like the first cut, and then you be like, what did you do to my hair? You know? And so I ended up cutting it myself after growing it out for maybe 3 months. And then I had like, my hair was like maybe an inch longer than like Jada Pinkett's. Like it was not very long at all. It was that hair was very short. And I just started growing it out from there. And then I started experimenting and buying different things from the beauty supply in my college town and making my own products back then. This was like 2011. I want to say 2010, 2011. We didn't have access to what we have access to now. And that was my natural hair journey. And then I have never looked back. So I have not, and I was experimenting, doing all the things, all the twists, all the flat ironing, all the updos, all the braid outs, the bantus, the extensions, I have not done sew-ins and wigs and stuff. I've never like gotten into that per se, but I've done a little bit of everything when it comes to natural hair. And then it wasn't until maybe as I got deeper to the natural hair movement, I almost became like a little anti-straight hair. Not that I'm saying it's a bad thing, but I do think it trains you to like a version of yourself that doesn't really exist. Like, and I think that you have to train yourself to love the version of you that is before you start, dabbling in these other styles that, you cannot possibly achieve with your hair on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying?
Ma'am, you just said a word right there. And I think that's kind of at the essence of what I try to talk about with fearless authenticity. It's like, we are who we are at our core. And there's a range of things that we can be to different people in different situations and in different environments. But the reality is that if we don't know who we are from the beginning, we're not coming to this from a place of strength. And that's what you just talked about. And that's why I think natural hair care journeys can be so life altering, because you start to meet yourself the way your hair grows out of your head. And then you have to say, okay, why don't I like myself or my hair exactly the way it is? Yes, I may want to change it and do things. Because I'm going to tell you something, my gray hair journey in some ways was more liberating and more scary than my natural hair care journey. Even though I had issues with both of them. And that's why it's interesting to me to hear you talk about your mom doing both at the same time, because like facing my age, I think was harder for me, even though I was a premature grayer and, I started going gray in my 20s. And so it's a genetic thing. And so, and girl, because this stripe started coming in. Thank you, Mom. But this started coming in and I was dying this and it's resistant. Like I was up in the salad every 3 to 4 weeks with this, trying to cover it and whatever, using sprays and all this other stuff. And when I was doing it, I felt like a failure and a fraud. Like I was covering something that I was fighting, as opposed to like now I could play with the color but I've accepted that this is who I am and it doesn't change who I am in my heart. And that's why I always ask people, especially if you've been through that journey, because I've had that conversation with my white girlfriends, my Latina girlfriends, my Black girlfriends, and all of us that are on some sort of spectrum with our hair or have some kind of struggle with our hair, whether it's curly, thin, something that we don't want, we in this battle with it. And that takes so much of our energy.
It does. It really does.
Do you find that people also share with you, because I know that you guys started, or you started when you were in your journey with doing a lot of videos and things like that, and that's still a very big part of of how your business is run. Do people share with you stories of how their hair journey has empowered them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had customers who, they had some form of cancer and their hair fell out during treatment. And, their doctor told them that, hey, like if you're going to start growing your hair back and wearing, doing different styles, you need to make sure your products are natural. So make sure you're reading the ingredients on them. And then they found CurlMix and then they grew their hair out again. And they were using CurlMix in the process. And like now they have like, a luscious wash and go with hair like down their back. And that is always extremely fulfilling for me, because sometimes, you can think, well, what I do is like maybe a little superficial. You can think that, oh, well, you're like if you were in color cosmetics or if you were in skincare or whatever, and I'm in hair care. And I think like, okay, like, is this really important? But then when you remember that, like your face, first of all, people judge you within the first 15 seconds of meeting you. And 60% of your face is typically your hair. And that's what frames your face and frames that first impression. And hair is often a sign of health for a lot of people as well. Then I'd be like, okay, I could become to realize that like hair is almost how you see yourself sometimes. And so it can be the confidence that you need to like walk into that job interview or go and like ask for the pay that you deserve, or to advocate for yourself in the hospital, or to like it really empower you to become a better version of yourself. And so that really keeps me going. And it reminds me of like the purpose of what I do.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we discount how important our hair is ourselves. Like we feel like we're being superficial when we talk about our hair or our looks or things like that. But and that's where I think sometimes the relationship gets twisted. And it's interesting to see you using your work to untwist that and also acknowledging where you've been with it. One thing I wonder about, and I always talk to entrepreneurs about this, is did you always know that this is what you wanted to do? You seem like you're really satisfied in your work and get inspiration from it. And I don't think I'm wrong in that assumption. When did you know that this was what you needed to be doing?
I feel like as entrepreneurs, you go through moments of like, oh my God, I love what I do. Oh my God, I need to quit. Like I can like get freedom. Like you're literally on like one of those spectrums, like at all times. And I think honestly, very recently, I started in having what we call click dinners with our best customers. So people who've spent over $3,000 with us, we bring them to like a private brunch, and it's like me and Tim and like my director of marketing and my team, and then we're just like listening to them. And when I heard how CurlMix had changed their lives, many of them had found CurlMix in the pandemic, or many of them had like introduced their entire families to CurlMix, and like now their husbands are going natural and their daughters are natural, and one of their grandbabies now wants to wear her hair natural for picture day and not actually like get her hair straightened. And it's like that makes me feel like, okay, Kim, you've made the right decisions up until this point. Like this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, yes, you've had a couple 100,000 customers, but imagine the people that they've impacted around them. An empowered Black woman, do you know what she does for the community? You know what I mean? Like they say that, I'll never forget the statistic. They were measuring who gave most to the homeless, or the the underserved, when they would come up and ask them for money, and it was Black women over and over. And it's like, if we feel beautiful and we feel empowered, people around us thrive also. So like, yeah, we've had maybe 250,000 customers, but like we've probably impacted millions and millions of people just based on my core audience of customers.
Because we so enthusiastic about stuff too. If something worked for us, we telling everybody, they mama, they cousin. And if somebody asks me like, wait a minute, girl, let me hook you up. Give me your number so I can text you this. We are good for that. We are good for that.
And Jeanne, and my customers is one thing too. But the second thing I would say is that like the way I get to impact my community is incredibly fulfilling. Yeah. When someone on my team tells me they bought their first house with their CurlMix paycheck, or they bought an engagement ring for their, boo, or that they're going back to school, and to know that we hire like people of color, Black people from the South Side of Chicago. We manufacture right here at home. Plenty of people are like, why don't you just manufacture overseas for cheap? And I was like, because I want to impact the community where I live. You know what I mean? I want to like change the people's lives that I know of. That makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing too. So I'm very satisfied in that.
And you should be, because another thing you're also doing is continuing a legacy. I mean, one of the buildings that you took over to work on CurlMix and to produce it is on the Soft Sheen campus. I mean, that is the originator, one of the originators. And like, people forget how important Chicago has been to Black hair care, and how in the past, especially when I was a kid, and before that, a lot of the Black hair care products that we used across the country were created in the city, manufactured in the city. And in a lot of ways, you're continuing that tradition.
You know what's so funny? Madam C.J. Walker was in Indiana. Like, that was her home base for like her Walker brand. You know what I mean? With all the women who would go out and sell her brand to other people. And she kind of built that distribution network from there. And then, you had the Gardner family, and Soft Sheen and Luster. And I mean, just like the core, I almost want to say, if you had to pick a city that had the most historical like reference to like Black
Johnson
beauty.
Products. We can't forget about Johnson Products as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is the city.
It would be Chicago. It would be Chicago. It would not be Atlanta. Everyone thinks that it's Atlanta. Atlanta's like new, and that's great, but the legacy is in Chicago. So for me, it felt a little surreal to even be an opportunity to be able to like to be in this building, and it being like 10 minutes from my house was like even better. I'm like, oh my gosh,
smart.
I just feel lucky in that, honestly. I remember when we went to look at the building earlier this year. We had very specific requirements for the building, and we kept coming up short with all the other ones we were looking at. Like, either they'd be a big empty warehouse. I was like, okay, but how are we going to hook up machines or kettles to make large batches of products? How are we going to get enough electricity to run a pumping line and the kettles and like all of our equipment? How are we going to have a space for us to have office space in addition to like this warehouse space? How are we going to maximize the overhead of the office space so it's not a bunch of negative space above all the desks? And I remember going to this building and seeing that it had its own parking lot. It had 2 levels of offices. It had a middle for the warehouse and the offices in the front as well. It had all the water hookups and the several bathrooms. And I'm like, this building is so perfect. Why? What was here before? What was here before? And then they were like, actually, this building used to belong to Soft Sheen back in the day. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay. I'm like,
it was meant to be. Like, the fact that you didn't know that that's where it was. Oh my gosh, girl, I love stories like that. When God and the universe come together, they like literally just go, here you go. This is like, yours.
I know, right? I know. And I was like, and then it was so close to my house. I was like, this is on the South Side too. And the other thing is like, we were on the West Side before, which we loved being on the West Side, but it was really far from my team. Everybody that worked for me lived on the South. And so it was like, it was perfect. It's perfect.
And I love how being true to yourself is the thing that brought this ease into your life, of how you're, even though nothing is easy, it comes together in a certain way. And I think your journey to entrepreneurship, a lot of us on the outside looking in will say it's magical. I mean, like, girl, I didn't know about Tim. I didn't realize it started with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and him winning that $100,000. Like, what? And from the outside looking in, that just sounds like a dream. And people think, oh, if I did this, then I could do that and things like that. But I'm sure the reality is something different, because your first startup, which was a niche social network, actually failed.
Yes.
So I'm sure that had to be disappointing, but it also led to CurlMix. How did you bounce back from that initial setback? And keep persisting in this idea of having a business? And did it teach you anything or give you any kind of coping mechanisms or systems? Because, we hear as entrepreneurs all the time, you got to fail forward. And that is such a difficult thing to do, to get in this habit of saying, okay, I did this and I messed it all the way up, but I did learn this and now I'm going to do it this way, because we're so taught that we only get that one chance.
Yeah.
How does that work out for you, and how has that journey taught you lessons about setbacks and failing forward?
Whew, I remember when I started that business, it was a niche social network for natural hair. So think like Facebook, but for hair.
Oh,
And this is in 2000 and right out of college, like 2012. I want to say I launched it 2013. Did it for like a year and a half, made no money and had to close it down. But in that, I picked up a ton of skills, marketing, video editing, website design, all the things. And Tim was working full time in tech. And he wasn't always working full time in tech. He went to school for like psychology and economics, but then read the manual. And then he got out of college and ended up working at Starbucks. Even after we had gotten the money from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he was like still working at Starbucks. And I was working at a portrait photography studio, saying goo goo gaga to babies. Literally, I was like, brrr, brrr. Like that was literally after college. That's what we were doing. And then he got the money from the show that I signed him up for because he didn't want to do it. He thought it was a waste of time and a waste of money. He was like, and I'm like, I don't care what you say. We sat here and watched the show for 2 hours and you got every question right. You need to be on this show. So I'm going to book you a ticket. You're going to go audition and good luck. And so he ends up getting on the show. You know what I mean? So it like ended up working out. And he was like, well, if I get on the show, Kim, and I win any money, like, we'll put 20% towards whatever business you want to start. And so that's when we put the first 15 to 20,000 into that failed startup that we launched. And I remember wanting to go get a job because I come from a household where my mom was like, what is it? INDEPENDENT. Do you know what that means?
Independence.
Yeah, right.
I think I know your mama. I think I know your mama.
And so so what's funny is that like having a husband that, and this is my own trauma, but having a husband that wanted to be like the breadwinner and like comfortable being the sole provider was not comfortable for me. Uh-huh. I did not like not making money, and I hated that my startup failed, and I was actually kind of depressed when it happened. And I remember him saying, and one of our worst fights ever was like, he was like, maybe you should get a job. I was like, ah! And then I like literally instantly broke into tears. And then he was like, honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I don't want you to get a job. He's like, he basically was like, I know that there's a cap on how much money I can make in this job. And I think that you are going to be the reason that, breaks that. You are going to be the thing that breaks that glass ceiling for us. You're going to make sure that we have wealth for generations. And so you can't quit because I'm not a natural entrepreneur. And that's what he would say. He's not a natural entrepreneur. He's not. I remember when he would like work on the business himself when I would be at work, because I was working too at that one point. And I would come home and nothing would be done. He had done none of the things that we were supposed to do. And I was like, why didn't you do this stuff? And he was like, my heart's not in it. It's got to be you, but I can work. And so he ended up getting a tech job, moving around as a contractor. He worked at Delta and a few other places, and he was working multiple contracts, and he was making like multiple six figures, like a couple $100,000. And I was working on a startup. So he is the thing that kept pushing me to figure it out, even when I wanted to quit. Because even though we did that business, shut it down, then launched CurlMix as a do-it-yourself box for curly hair. So think like Blue Apron, but for hair. Did that for 2 years, made very little money and no profit, right? Still couldn't pay myself. So this is we graduated from college in I hope this is right, 2013, 2012, I don't remember. And then I'm not able to pay myself until 2018.
Wow.
There's 5 years that I go making no money for myself. Like, you know what I mean? And we are living off of his paychecks.
How did you shift things? What was it that made you say, okay, enough of this, but I still want to do this? You also had the support. I'm sure Tim's support is a big part of that moment. But how did you say, okay, I'm gonna take a step back, but still commit to it, but do it differently? What was the choice that you made to keep you in it?
So I actually went to go apply. So that fourth year, I was like, this ain't working. I'm not good enough at this. I was like, I need to go get an MBA or something. I was like, because I obviously know enough about business. So I actually applied for the GMAT, took it, failed miserably. I was like, and my husband was like, Kim, I told you not to take that GMAT. He was like, if you're good enough, you'll do it and they'll actually come back and teach. And you'll never have to go to school. And I was just like, oh, okay, Tim. Okay. So he's just always in my ear, like, ugh. And I was just like, this is
That
so annoying.
psychology degree was working.
It was working.
I
So
love it.
then I was 7 months pregnant, and I was getting ready to close up the DIY box. And I had just went through my accelerator. I learned that my DIY box was like a vitamin and not a painkiller. That means it was nice to have, but it wasn't like something that people were like gonna snatch out of my hand. You know what I mean? And so I essentially talked to an advisor from Backstage Capital. They gave me my first check, by the way, for $25,000 of an investment. And he basically was like, what's your best-selling box? I'm like, it's our flaxseed gel, but manufacturers won't make it for us. I went to 3, they all said no. And he was like, figure it out. Like, you figure out how to make this flaxseed gel. And here I am, just failed my GMAT, 7 months pregnant, year 4 of entrepreneurship, not making like money for real, and living depending on my husband. You know what I mean? And I was just like, all right, this is my last shot. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna make this flaxseed gel, and we're gonna do some pre-orders. And if we sell out of these pre-orders, then I'll keep going. But if we don't, I'm gonna like wrap this up. And we end up selling like hundreds in a matter of hours when we launched the pre-orders for the flaxseed gel. And at that time, I think we'd only made maybe $15,000 a month. And I literally pivoted the business when my baby was born. He was 6 weeks. We literally got rid of all the boxes and started selling this flaxseed gel. First month we did 3,000. Second month we did 8,000. I'm like, man, if we can get back to 16,000, like we'll be doing the best we did out of these last 2 years in just 3 months. Ended up doing 30,000 without Facebook ads or anything. And I was like, honey, I figured it out. I need you to quit your job and come work for the business.
Wow, sis. But let's go back to that statement, not a vitamin, but a painkiller. Wait, talk to me about that statement.
Yes, many of us start businesses because we want to see something in the market, because we want to see it in the market, not because people are willing to pay us for it in the market. And that was my problem. I launched a DIY box because it was what I wanted. I wanted something that would be fun to do. And when you are fun to do, you are a vitamin. And you think about the brands of pain medication that we know some Aleve, some Tylenol, some ibuprofen, all the things. How many vitamin brands do you know? Like literally, I know one a day. Women.
Nature Made, one a day.
What is that? I didn't even know Nature Made. I had never even heard of it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't take vitamins every day, but if I have a scorching like headache, like a searing headache, I am going to go take an ibuprofen.
Give me an Advil. Give me a Motrin. Give me we call it by the brand name and by the medication name. I love it.
Band-Aids, Neosporin, anything that's regarding pain. So I realized that, people were still, even though they were buying our DIY boxes, they were piling up, and they were still going to get ready-made hair care products from the grocery store. And I was like, okay, so this isn't working. And my margins were only 30%, whereas someone was selling the same bottle for the same price with 80% margins. And I was like, oh my gosh, even if I could scale this business, I shouldn't, because my math doesn't math. And I can never grow this business. And so that's when we like that shift. But honestly, that shift of what made me figure it out much faster. One, I had wasted a lot of my own money. Like we had probably spent maybe $25,000 of our own money at that point. We had maxed out some credit cards. We had done lots of different things. And it was getting pregnant. It was, okay, I'm about to have a baby. And what am I going to give this baby? We don't have a home yet. We don't have and I was always the person, I'm not having kids, but I don't have anything to give them. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Can I tell you, I saw that in you when we met, because I don't know if you remember the conversation we had, because Bill Bellamy was in the green room with us, and you were talking about your kids and their education and your concerns. One of the things that really touched me about you, Kim, was how open you were about your thought process, about what you want for your children and your doubts in them. And the thing that I thought was really amazing from, a parent like Bill Bellamy, who has, kids in college or what have you, and has risen his way up through success, and you doing the same thing and thinking about it from the opposite end. The fact that you both were talking about things that a lot of parents won't talk about in kind of open with strangers. And the fact that I could tell that you were concerned about your legacy in that moment, not just for the business, but for your children, what you're leaving behind them. So the question I have for you is how does that process apply in the rest of your life? And how does wanting to leave a legacy for your children and build that generational wealth, how does that expand? Because it's clear it expands to your community as well. How does that expand into the way you make decisions and what you ultimately want to leave as your mark on this world?
Ooh, that was a heavy question. Okay.
Because we had a heavy moment, girl. I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to bring this up, but I want to, because I found it to be such a beautiful Black moment. It's a beautiful moment for human beings, period. But for us to be able to do that and say, because my parents if they had doubts about how they were raising me, it didn't come out. Not even with other people.
You know what it is? I think I've taken an entrepreneurship approach to parenting. Which means that, one, you cannot do it all by yourself, which means that I have a community of people who are helping me raise my children, between my sister and my mom and like my cousins, my family, like they're helping for sure. Two, I have also learned that I don't know what I don't know. And so trying to make decisions for my children in a silo is going to always mess you up, right? You can't just make decisions from like, this is how I want my kid raised in this little box with these little parameters. It's I think we have a very free household, just because I felt like I want my kids, that saying is like, I'm not just a little friend, you know what I'm saying? Like I actually want to be my kid's friend. I want them to talk to me when they're older. You know what I mean? I want them to call me when they have a problem. And I think that's the problem in like a lot of our households, is that you're not friends with your parents. And so they can't come talk to you when, ish hits the fan, if they need to have an abortion, if they didn't get into the school they wanted and they're depressed, if someone is bullying them at school, like all these things we don't know about as parents. And I never want my kids to feel that way. So that's one. Two, I've learned that the relationships are the most important thing in the world, more than money, more than any kind of materialistic thing, more than relationships are, and they're good to get you to your next level in your career, or they're also good to keep you sane and happy and fulfilled. And my relationships with the people in my nuclear, my best friends, my husband, my children, like my family, like those are the most important to me. So I'm always going to make sure I'm making decisions that positively impact my ecosystem. And when it comes to schooling for them, up until now, my kids have pretty much had who I've handpicked to be around them as their world and their influence. But when they go to school, it's 50-50, right? You're taking 50% what they get from home and 50% what they get in the classroom. And if I can't control what's happening, at the very least, I can put you in the best environment possible. And the best environment doesn't always mean academics to me, because I don't want you to feel like you don't know what it means to be Black. I don't want you to feel like you're not beautiful because your hair is kinky like mine. The rest of your classmates' hair is straight. I don't want you to be teased for being Black or being the only or being othered in your classroom, a place you go every single day, because I realized how stifling it was for me as someone who went to a traditionally white institution. And I remember my first day of business school, they were like, all right, you guys turn to your neighbor and introduce yourself and say hi. I was the only Black girl in the class. Literally everybody at my table, 4 of the people who were white, got up and went to the other people in the room to say hi. And I was just like, for a little Black girl from the South Side of Chicago who is going to university with a lot of people who don't look like her in a major that she might be the only one in, which I was for supply chain management, it was just very uncomfortable. And I don't want to do that to my child, because I didn't realize how smart I was until I was running my own company and had a staff of 20 plus people. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm brilliant, but it took me almost 30 years to figure that out.
Was there a moment when you looked up, and what happened? What happened in that moment?
When I realized you know what it was? We got to talk about the work and not about the politics. So we spent more time being creative, thinking of ideas and, analyzing, strategies and things like that. And I realized I was in the call, I'm like, oh, dang, like we didn't have a per my last email conversation, or we didn't have a, you know what I'm saying? Like those, and that's what happens when you're being othered in those environments. So we're talking to Bill Bellamy. I was just kind of like, he's already done it, right? He's been through the he's been through the are you getting that noise in the background, Jeanne?
I don't hear anything.
No, okay, great. He's been through the, the othering of his children, and how did that impact them? You know what I mean? Okay, they're going to these elite schools, they're going to school with bankers' children, but like, how is it impacting them really mentally? And so he had a really good experience, which is great. But I've heard other things. I have friends who are big shot attorneys in New Greenwich in New York, and they're like, yeah, my 8-year-old son came home and he basically was told that like, there's a girl who goes to his school who was white, and she basically was like, yeah, I can't marry you when we get older, because you're black. And he's 8. And I was like, I don't want to have that conversation with my 8-year-old. Like, I'm not ready for that. So it's important to me to ask people who've done it and get their expert feedback so I can make informed decisions. And that's the same thing I do in business. I always have a coach. I always have my mastermind communities. I always have people who just know more than me. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. And the beauty of you being able to, because there is a moment of humility when you realize you need to ask for help. And so many of us fight that moment. Have you always done it, or was there a moment that turned the corner for you that made you start to ask for that kind of help?
But I always ask for help. I have a hard time accepting help. So like my husband complains about that all the time. Like, I need to let more people help me. Now I'm a kept woman, so I let him help me all the time. But it wasn't always like that.
I love it.
He's definitely, because you know what it is? You don't let people help you when you don't trust people. And a lot of us have this notion of you're guilty until proven innocent. And I realized that he lived life you're innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. And when he did that, he's more trusting of like the average person. He's like, the average person does not want to hurt you. Why do you assume so much fear in that interaction? And that means that if you're afraid of everyone else around you, you don't trust them, then you don't let them help you, which means you are not vulnerable enough to ask for help. And so I think, marrying him has helped me in so many ways.
I love that. And, that's something culturally I think we have, because we also have a lot of trauma, a lot of our lives, a lot of people who look like us, our lives have been traumatic and have led to that kind of thing. So that's another one of my tenets is about taking care of ourselves and healing that stuff so we can get to that greatest, highest good that we're meant to do. And I love to see how that's playing out with you. Now, one of your biggest stories for me in CurlMix's history is the Shark Tank turn down, honey. Like, literally. God. So you and Tim go on the show in 2019? And you said no to a $400,000 investment. Now, y'all really bet on yourselves. And I think that's been a theme throughout our whole conversation is hearing how you and your husband bet on yourselves as you move forward. And I love that narrative. But I am sure that there was a point in there where, because it all looks brilliant and smart now, because you went on to raise money through equity crowdfunding to the tune of $4.5 million from 7,000 investors. You guys have strong sales, 22 million in lifetime sales online alone. And that's not retail. Let's be very clear, not being in stores, which is essential to a lot of products' lifespan. So you've been able to do that. All looks brilliant now. But what was it like in that moment? And were there doubts in your mind if that was the best thing to do in that moment, to say no to that? Because from what I can tell, it looks great now. I just wonder what it was like in that moment and how that may have become a turning point for you guys.
I was certain Shark Tank was not going to air our episode.
Okay.
I remember prepping for the show. Prepping for the show is one of the hardest things I've ever done. I rank it equity crowdfunding, natural childbirth, and then Shark Tank. In that order. Those are the hardest things I've ever done.
Wow.
And Shark Tank, you're sitting there in front of a few $1 billion in net worth, and you're staring at them as a stare off for the first 30 seconds. And then you pitch, and if you flub it, they air it anyway. So you better make sure you get your spiel correct. And then after that, you're going back and forth, in the tank with the sharks. And my husband and I, we had talked the night before about, hey, like we're not going to take any deal over 15% because we know we're going to have to raise again. And Robert Herjavec wouldn't negotiate, and he couldn't tell the hair that was done versus the hair that wasn't for curly hair. Like he didn't even know which one was frizzy and which one wasn't. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you don't even know anything about the industry at all. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to turn it down. But when we finished airing, I was like, they're going to think that we just came on the show for publicity and we were trying to use the sharks. And that's not what we were trying to do. We really just wanted a good deal. We were already going to make $1 million that year. Robert like totally undervalued the company. And it just was a bad deal. It would have been a bad deal for us to take. And I just thought, I'm like, this isn't going to go well. And there was plenty of doubt. And I just thought, okay, well, at least we're honorable. We did the thing that we knew we could go home with and be proud of, even if the show doesn't air, even if we did all of this for nothing. And then as soon as we're having like this conversation, all the Black people who work at Shark Tank on the set came out from behind the shadows. Like literally it was like 10 of them. I'm like, wait, where were all of y'all? Because I've been here for 2 or 3 days. I have not seen any of y'all. And they were like, oh my God, that was so dope. Like you turned it down. Like they were like hyping me. And I literally did not think that was going to be a good decision for us, but it was just the truth of, I was me being true to myself. And then to see the world's reaction, to be so hyped that we like knew our worth and our value and turned it down. I could have never predicted that ever.
Listen, I'm going to tell you, because I think I shared this with you when we met. I remember seeing I want to say I first saw it in The Defender. And then I started seeing it elsewhere when you guys announced your equity crowdfunding. And it was really interesting because when I talked about, like, I thought it was dope because I remember what happened on Shark Tank. And I was just like, and I don't think I realized that y'all were from Chicago in that moment because I was just kind of watching it in passing. And I might have even seen a clip of it as opposed to the show, because that's generally how I see things nowadays. You know how it is with entrepreneurship. But I remember I was looking, for a story to talk about on the air, and that came across my email from The Defender, and I'm looking at it. I was like, oh my God. I was like, so Black people in Chicago are offering people the chance to be a part of it. I talked about it on the air, and when I posted it, I got more responses than I expected to, saying, wait, where's the link so I can go invest? Where is this? Mm-hmm. And it was such a beautiful moment for me because I was like, this is our people saying, we're going to double down on our people. Like, and a couple, mm-hmm. like, I remember one of the comments was, I used it. I remember when I was just found him on YouTube and stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead on and put some money on this because I'm betting on this as a winner, whatever. And it is interesting how that choice is actually empowering too, not just for you and your company, but also for the people who are part of it. And I don't know that we often feel that way. I mean, we saw the same, I think Arlen Hamilton saw the same thing happen when she opened up investors to be part of her fund. What was that, last year? Yes. It was somewhere around the same time as your situation, maybe a little bit after. And I wonder how you see that part of it now that you have these 7,000 investors who might not have otherwise been invested in a company before.
Yeah, I honestly, I feel very privileged and honored that they would even consider us being their first investment. I also love that we're able to have this conversation. A lot of the time, and I'll tell you why, Jeanne. For many of us, we hate when brands sell because we're like, hey, like we feel like you used our dollars and our support to, grow the business, and then you get a big payday and you're the only one that gets this big payday. And then you've kind of sold off your community. And that's how many people feel. And I feel like with equity crowdfunding, the reason that we're upset is because we don't get a piece of the pie. Like we helped and we got nothing. And the traditional capitalistic society says, well, that's the way entrepreneurship goes. I was the one who put up all the risk, so I get all the benefit, but not community economics, right? Community economics says, hey, yes, you supported it, but I'm also going to give you an opportunity to own a piece of it. So that if there is a liquidity event, if there is some kind of IPO or some kind of exit, you are going to get a piece of the pie because you contributed. And I think that is going to empower those 7,000 people to talk about the potential return that they got from their CurlMix investment and to potentially go make other investments or start their own business and let other people invest in them, which will grow economic development in the Black community like for years to come, decades to come. And
Girl,
so
that's a Kwanzaa principle. Y'all are literally living a Kwanzaa principle. The one that's hardest to say.
is it Umo?
No,
Let
I
me not.
think, wait, hold up. I think it's, wait, hold up. Let me look it up because I think it's Kujichagulia, but let me make sure I see, wait, Kwanzaa, hold up.
Is it like group economics?
Collective economics. Hold up. Collective work in economics is, no, it's Ujima. My bad. I just like to say Kujichagulia. Because I'm stupid. But that's what it is. That is what it is, sis. That is what y'all are living. And that's a legacy, ma'am.
Oh, thank you, Jeanne.
That's a legacy, sis. I cannot wait to see what you do. I mean, you recently relaunched, did a rebranding, and I know that there are a lot of other things that you are doing. I'm winding down now. I have a few questions, 2 questions that I always ask people toward the end of a podcast episode. What is your proudest achievement? And as a twist on that, what do you still dream of doing?
Oh, my proudest achievement. I do not. That is a hard question, Jeanne.
It is.
That's a hard question. My proudest achievement.
And you can take it personally or professionally or as a whole, in life as a whole.
Ooh. I actually think it's going to be a personal one. I don't even think it's a professional achievement. Because you know what? I all those like accolades you mentioned, I had them on a list before. Shark Tank, Forbes, Oprah, things, Inc. 5,000. And, and I raised the money from crowdfunding. And all those things, though they felt amazing, were not quite as fulfilling as you think they will be. And so then I realized, oh, those are actually not like my proudest achievements. Like my proudest achievements, and I love my children, and I love being their mother, and I love being a wife, but those things are also not necessarily my proudest achievements. I think what I'm most proud of is the fact that I've been to over like 20 countries. And it is because I am a citizen of the world, and I love people, and I love learning about them and their communities and their religions and their food and their families and their way of life. And I think that makes me a better leader. And so that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Ma'am, I love that. What do you still dream of doing?
Ooh, I dream of visiting every country in the world, and being fluent in French and Spanish.
Okay, I like that. And then my final question, the ultimate question: when do you feel like you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of you?
One night with my best friend.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Kim, it has been an honor and a pleasure. I can't wait to see what else you do, ma'am. If you have gotten to this point and garnered all this wisdom at your age, I can't wait to see what happens next.
Oh, thank you, Jeanne.
I mean
you're
that,
an incredible
sis.
interviewer. Incredible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean that, sis. Like this, girl, you gonna change the world. You keep your head about yourself and focus on what you want. It's gonna just change because you're already changing things.
Oh, Jeanne, thank you so much.
Wow, that conversation, I loved it on so many different levels. I want to dive right into the highlights. When Kim said that hair is almost how you see yourself sometimes, that one hit home, because I had my natural hair journey as well, even though it was many, many moons ago, but it highlights this beautiful connection between loving yourself and loving the things about yourself that you have to learn to love for whatever reason, and how everything changes when you get to that love and feel good because you're empowered to do all these other things that you need and want to do. And that layer of falling in love with a version of yourself that doesn't really exist versus training yourself to love this true version of you. Even if we're just talking about hair, that level is deep. But when you go into what that may mean on the inside, and Kim's business philosophy, acknowledging how so many of us start businesses because there's something we want to see, buy, or have out in the marketplace, and then needing to figure out and balance that with what people are willing to pay us for. It's a big lesson. And I remember it was one I stumbled into. And I'm glad that I had people in my circle who had experienced that as well, because your businesses change so much when you start them and the things you think you have to offer. And then your customers tell you what you have to offer. And her insistence on making decisions that positively impact her whole ecosystem, I think that's a really good example of thinking globally, even when it comes to local action. A lot of times we think about that statement as much bigger, but it can manifest itself on a lot of different layers. And I'm also inspired that she steps back, looks at her work, and gives herself credit. When she said, and I think all of us can relate to this statement, when she said she didn't realize how smart she was until she was running her own company and had a staff of 20 plus people, and how it took her 30 years to figure that out. I'm glad you figured it out, Kim, and you are continually leveling up and choosing yourself. And that's an inspiration for us to do that on a constant basis. So thank you, Kim Lewis, for making the time, sharing your journey, as well as the lessons that you've learned along the way. That's so generous. And I really appreciate you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention, for your support, for sharing it. I could not and would not do this without you or my amazing production team. So thank you to you as well. I hope that you will share, rate, review, download, subscribe, whatever you do with the episode, that's positive. Check it out wherever you get them, including on YouTube. Encourage everybody to do that. And also please join my community. I'm at JM Sparrow on most social, or at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow. And please drop me comments, questions, thoughts, and suggestions, because that's how we grow. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. We'll see you again soon.